Josh.
Okay. Will we all be as high on Suede as we will on PJ Harvey? We'll find out. Suede, self-titled album, debut album, released March 29th, 1993. In the opening montage, you heard Animal Nitrate, and now you're going to hear Metal Mickey. Okay, Matt, what are the stats?
SUEDE-SUEDE comes in at number 99 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 8 in 1993, number 588 of all time. It is Suede's second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1994's Dog Man Star, which I assume we are going to cover in a future episode.
I don't believe so. No,
Yeah, I don't think so.
We're not covering him?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I am mistaken then. And this is, 0 for 4, guys. Nobody's making Rolling Stones list tonight because this wasn't there either. And Suede is ranked number 208 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Okay, well, they were formed in London, England in 1989, and the band at this time consists of Bernard Butler on guitar and piano, Brett Anderson's the lead vocalist, Matt Osmond's on bass, and Simon Gilbert's on drums. This is our first time covering them. They have 9 total albums, and genres include alt-rock, Britpop, and glam rock. Influences that I'm sure you've heard listening to this album are Roxy Music, The Smiths, David Bowie, The Cure, Pet Shop Boys, Echo and the Bunnymen. Artists that directly said this album influenced them: Block Party, a band called The Long Blondes, Interpol, Dum Dum Girls, and an indie rock group from California called Girls. Liked them also. The band never had commercial success in the US, so they never broke into the Hot 100 or the Billboard 200. I saw they made like the modern rock tracks at one point or another. But the hype train was real in Britain on these guys. They had 3 number 1 albums in the UK and 8 singles in the top 10. Some fun facts about them: they are considered one of the big 4 of the Britpop movement, if not the first. What are the other 3 of the big 4?
Blur.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oasis, Blur, and Pulp.
Correct. Yep. All 3. Those are the other 3 of the big 4. They received a lot of attention early on before even a single or this album came out. In April 25th, 1992, Melody Maker put them on the cover of the magazine with the quote, "Suede, the best new band in Britain," before their first single even came out. According to a March 1993 article in The Independent, at the time, Suede quote, "had more hype than anybody since the Smiths or possibly even the Sex Pistols." Animal Nitrate was their 3rd single and broke into the UK top 10. Suede entered the British charts at number 1, registering the biggest initial sales of a debut album since Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, an album John and I talked about.
Yes, we did. And I think we mentioned that it was the highest debut at the time. Yeah.
A decade before, and this album sold over 100,000 copies in its first week of release, which seems like a lot to me. A lounge singer's lawsuit forced them to go by the London Suede anytime they were in the US and touring or releasing their albums, so that's what they were known as. And due to trademark, I guess this lounge singer was known as Suede. And they did go on a tour starting in the summer of 93 after this album, but Suede's American success was limited, as they had already begun to be upstaged by their opening act, the Cranberries, who received more support from MTV that Suede did not receive. Justine Frischmann was in the initial version of Suede. She was dating vocalist Brett Anderson at the time, and then they broke up.
Didn't she date Damon Albarn, too, from Blur?
That's my next point. They broke up in the spring
yeah.
of 91, and then she was kicked out of the band and started dating Damon Albarn from Blur, and then she later started Elastica, the band. And those are the facts. And Suede, not a band I heard of. Let's start with John. What did you think?
Yeah, so it's just funny with Britpop, there were so many of these like one-name bands. We mentioned Oasis, Pulp, and Blur, but there's also like Travis, there's James, and there's Suede. And I just think it's just fascinating because some of them, like Oasis, broke through intensely,
American,
right?
yeah.
And Travis broke through pretty well too, like Why Does It Always Rain on Me and Sing in those songs. And then Pulp and Blur kind of like didn't break through as much, and then James broke through but with just one song, that song Laid, that was all over the place, right? And Suede sort of fell in the Blur and Pulp thing where it's sort of like I knew the name but I didn't really know much about them. I just knew they were another of what I thought were seemingly endless, Britpop bands in the 90s that did not hide the Britishness of their singing. That's kind of what it is. Not a negative thing, just that's what it was. But holy God, was this a good album. Like, I was shocked at how good this album was from the first time I listened to it. It combines so many things I like. Yeah, The Smiths is an obvious hallmark, but that new romantic vibe was all over it. The Englishness of something like The Jam, right? Or even before that, The Kinks would be in there. In fact, The Jam was kind of a group that I kind of describe this as like if the Smiths met The Jam, would be the sound that I thought this was. But it also was very glam rock.
Yeah.
It was a lot of New York Dolls, even a little bit of T-Rex, maybe not quite as heavy, the guitars, but the vocal performance on this, right? His name's Brett Anderson, if I remember correctly. He's a very charismatic singer, even if you don't see the videos. It's just his voice has a charisma to it, even when you're listening to, back then a CD or cassette, right? And in my case, you're listening to it on a streaming service. And there's just good songs all over this album. It's just a very pleasing mishmash of lots of things I different like. I could absolutely see why this band immediately hit. There's a couple different acts I think of like that. You mentioned the Sex Pistols come to mind, but I remember the Strokes kind of broke with that. Like before an album came, they had a rep, and then later like the Arctic Monkeys were kind of like that. And there's always these bands that have that rep, and I can absolutely see why this group got that pub early, because there's an undeniable catchiness to this that pops out immediately. I'm somewhat shocked this didn't cross over to the United States. Even like Blur had Song 2 and like Girls and Boys that kind of were songs that you could do. Pulp had like Common People and stuff that kind of was able to go over. But when you think of Suede, like you would think a song like Animal Nitrate would have been on MTV a lot. I don't know, I would say it's because they sound so British, and that maybe that's what consign the Smiths, right, in their time, or the Jam, right?
Yeah.
But it's always weird because the Cure sound somewhat British, and certainly Oasis weren't hiding their Britishness. You know what I mean? And they were a massive band in the United States. So, and the Travis songs that broke through that were relatively big hits. There's definitely a Britishness there. To them. And so I can't quite place it, except you mentioned that the Cranberries toured with them. Once again, another example, because certainly no one sounds more Irish than the Cranberries, right? Yeah. And they broke through big. And it is interesting that they overshot them, because the Cranberries have great music. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't get why the Cranberries hit, but you would think that Suede would come along right with them. But I really like this album. This is close to an elite album for me, guys. It had high replayability throughout the week, and I found myself revisiting it quite a bit. I didn't realize they were on Spotify. They are under the London Suede, so that clears that up, Josh. I actually listened to this on YouTube both times I did it, thinking they weren't on there. So
I did too.
Yep.
I did not look to see if Amazon. Yes, they're under the London Suede and Amazon.
So weird.
So thank you for letting me know that. So for those that may be looking for this album after, I don't know what Josh and Matt are going to think, but on my review, you're going to want to look under the London Suede. So yeah, easy thumbs up for me. I thought this was a really excellent album. And I know a lot of the 90s albums, so it also was fun to have an album I like this much fly under my radar. So there we go.
I wonder, before Matt gives, if it's like the glam rock kind of androgynous thing, and I think the lead singer's kind of androgynous in my opinion. And I wonder if that's kind of like not where the mindset was at, or where
guess,
masculinity was at in America at the time. I don't know. I'm just
could you
speculating.
only be like a novelty act? Because like Right Said Fred was all over, and they certainly were doing
Well,
a lot.
if you think of all the rock that's popular in the U.S., like Nirvana and like all the grunge and stuff, it's all, and even like Guns N' Roses is like it's all kind of like very like masculine and aggro in a way. The way this is not. I don't know.
Maybe of the time, I know, but there's like examples of like like David Bowie and stuff that kind of transcend that.
Yeah, but he was around like a lot.
Yeah, in different times,
this.
like Boy George Culture Club was
That's
like
all like 80s stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So it had happened before, but it just
it's
maybe
like
not
like
it
past. Yeah.
Yeah.
This moment. Yeah.
Maybe it's a good question because I don't understand either. And yeah, I saw the London Suede. Wasn't the English beat, wasn't that a thing too? Like it was the beat and the English beat. So, but I did notice that. I was like, oh crap, here's another album that's not on Spotify. But then I just typed in Suede. It somehow it popped up. It was like London Suede. I was like, oh, that's weird. Okay, and I was like, is it the same? And it was. So, yeah, back to back, man. But this and PJ Harvey, it's like two albums that I knew nothing about. At least PJ Harvey, I did know the one song, the was it Sheila Nagig? But like this one, I didn't know anything. I've always known the album cover though. Like it's another one of those records that I just saw the album cover here and there. It's a very it's kind of like a striking album cover with the two figures.
Kissing.
Yeah, like, and not just kids. They're like they're going at it. They're sucking face, right? Like they're going to town on that. Yeah. So
it's like how Matt makes out with women.
Damn straight. I don't mess around. So it's very it's like, oh, okay, there's this band called Suede, right? And supposedly they're Britpop, which okay, fine. Which I like that, right? Like I really liked Oasis. That was one of my favorite bands in the 90s. And I just never, that was the one that I stuck with. I was a very Americanized version of Britpop fan because I like Oasis, right? And yeah, there's these other bands that maybe I heard a Blur song or I did know that Pulp song and I've always liked it, but yeah, never went out and bought the record, right? Never remember hearing it on the radio or seeing it on MTV to the point where because maybe that was just how I was buying music, right? It was like what's on MTV, and that's what my friends were doing too. So it's not like, and I had an older brother, so I was getting some stuff, but I don't know. This was not something that I was getting from him, or older sibling, anybody else. I didn't have that avenue. So, and I never got around to listening to this record until last week. And I'm with you, John, man. This is, it sounds great. Yes, the glam, the Smiths, all that stuff, it's certainly, it pops. It just got such an interesting sound though throughout. I really like the production. It's got, it's hard to describe. It's distorted. But it's somewhat synthetic. Like there's a lot of effects that they are using to kind of, it's like a lot of reverb and echoey kind of, sounds that are happening. It's psychedelic as well. I cut out for a few minutes. I don't know if anybody mentioned psychedelia, but I think like She's Not Dead certainly has like kind of like it's like a slow down type song. It's very, ethereal and, and stuff like that. So it's got, I think, yeah, exactly. It's got kind of a psychedelic vibe to it as well. But I thought I thought there was a good amount of variety on it. I really like songs like Pantomime Horse and Breakdown, these songs that kind of start off slow and, they're kind of somewhat ballady, but then they build right to this really great crescendo that's just like, it just releases this energy out, it's and Pantomime Horse in particular is one of my favorite songs on this in an album chock full of standout songs, but that one in particular is just like the way that song flows and builds and his voice too. Yeah, absolutely. It's Brett Anderson. He's the lead singer. You're right, John. He's got this captivating voice that's very dramatic. It's very emotional, and I didn't watch any videos. I don't really know what these people look like, but you could see this being a very charismatic, kind of dramatic lead singer persona. And so I don't know if you mentioned this either, Josh, but I saw that one of the members of this band before this album came out was Justine Finchman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
from Elastica. Did you talk about that?
I did say that.
You did. Okay. So I didn't know that either, right? So and I really like that Elastic album. I was like, oh, that's cool, right? That kind of makes sense. But yeah, this is another great find. I think. And I think this album I liked right away, and the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. So it's just got a good mix of different things. Very, very catchy, very kind of unique sounding as well. Like I think when you're taking all those production styles with the lead vocals, even though it does fall under, it's Britpop, but because they are drawing from so many other like you guys said, like glam rock in particular, but other things as well. It creates its own sound. So great album. I should have listened to it earlier. Big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, they kind of resisted that Britpop label later on, once everybody was going, and it seemed like they kind of also quickly got like passed by other bands in terms of popularity. Their popularity kind of like fell off. But I thought this album this album was more of a grower for me. I wasn't like as high immediately as you guys seem to be. I definitely enjoyed the kind of guitar glam rock sound that they were bringing to the presentation. It took me a little, something about his voice kind of like threw me off and is a sticking point for me in some way. I think it's too kind of like wailing and like grandiose, or maybe like falsetto in a way that doesn't work for me in some way at times. But overall, I think this is a pretty strong album. I think it's basically like, 3/4 of it I really liked by the end, by the time I through my listens. I like the kind of soaring vocals. It has this big like kind of big sound to it, especially on like this like Pantomime Horse, which you mentioned, Matt, as liking. But yeah, they have these like really catchy structures and choruses that like throughout that I really glommed onto as the more I listened to it. Animal Nitrate, Moving, I really like. The Drowners, these are all like singles that they released, and I really could understand why. Breakdown, that really reminded me of like a David Bowie song, or like a sound that David Bowie would make. It's just very reminiscent of that. And Metal Mickey was another one that was really catchy. I didn't pay as attention to the lyrics as much as I think I should have. I think there was something there that I was missing, but I just really kind of liked their up-tempo sound and the energy that they were bringing overall throughout the album. That really worked for me as well. So I think this is a great album. I just like need more time with it, and I think that Dogman Star is their next album, even though we're not talking about it, was a better seller, and I think was kind of considered like their peak critically in terms of their sound. Bernard Butler, who's the guitarist on this one, he left the band shortly after, due to like kind of dissatisfaction with the band and the touring in the US. That was a sticking point for him, like tension among how the band was acting and stuff.
He didn't want to, or he just
he didn't like how they were like, I guess, partying and stuff, or like just kind of the attitude of the band. He felt like they were being too excessive, I think.
Okay.
And then like he left for like a death in the family and came back, and they like kind of carried on without him, and he didn't like how they like that happened and all went down and stuff. So I guess he just was kind of dissatisfied.
That's a big loss, because the guitar sound on this is a big part of the appeal.
And I think he's part of kind of the songwriting as well, in terms of like the music and construction. So yeah, we'll see if we maybe we'll talk about that next album on a bonus episode or something, or check it out on your own. But yeah, I liked it, and it was definitely something that the more I listened to it, the more I liked. So
yeah, and I was surprised. I was surprised to see that they had more album. Like they had an album in 2022. Like I guess I just assumed like, well, they had that one album that with the people making out on the cover, and then that was it. But no, I guess they've been around.
Yeah, they've carried on through some iterations.
I had slow down, slow down, like stuck in my head for like days after that song too from the Drowners.
Taking me out. Yeah, it's a very glam is absolutely. I heard that right away. It's a very glam sounding.
Oh yeah.
Type of.
I mean, I don't think we're geniuses at this point. We're just referring to all the stuff we listen to. It's getting easier and easier. So, yeah. So, well,